Once upon a time, there was a warrior who never stopped walking, a man who only needed to drink the droplets of water falling from the leaves of trees and fed himself with just 3 petals. Basically, he was a herbivore. His name was Buryong, but we'll call him Billy for simplicity. Billy was a rather unknown young man. Little was known about him other than that he never rested. He walked through deserts under a hellish sun, he walked through blizzards, he crossed Hurricane Katrina, and he even walked through a forest on fire. This guy was incredible. Even when he stopped to sleep, he didn't stop walking, but he would wake up from his sleepwalking when he banged his head on a rock. However, no large rocks, rivers, or mountains were enough to interrupt his daily walk. With the swing of his sword, he cut through everything in his path. Imagine if he saw a car parked in a crosswalk. From the beginning of his journey, he never stopped to rest even once. As he traveled, he grew stronger each passing day, and hairier too, even growing a goat-like beard. In the 3rd year of his journey, he no longer left footprints as he walked. The guy had become a monk. In the 4th year, he could walk on water, becoming like Jesus, even mimicking his appearance. Could that be a copyright issue? In the 5th year, he managed to walk without touching the ground, walking in the infinite space of Goju. 6 years later, he became a celebrity. The places he visited became well known, and gossip about him increased. During this time, some masters tried to stop him from continuing his morning walks, but none ever succeeded. In the 7th year, he became a pillar of martial arts after defeating 14 great masters, all while walking. In the 8th year of walking, he defeated the king of Murim and his entire army, and only the passage was missing. At the beginning of the 9th year, he suppressed religious strongholds and completely demolished the war bases around the world. And in the 10th year, he finally stopped. I thought he would turn into a boat and start swimming, but no. After 3,689 days since the beginning of his journey, Billy finally reached the end. After that day, people began to call him the most famous man in Murim. The mountain that Billy had sliced in half became a tourist attraction, the first hole he encountered on his way. An old con artist explained that after finishing his journey, Billy disappeared, leaving only his sword behind, and for the right price, that sword could be yours. But then our protagonist arrives to ruin the con artist's life. He grabs the sword and bends it in half, ruining the con artist's sails. This rubber sword certainly wasn't used by the greatest man in the world unless he liked soft things. He notices a chest lying around, and when he kicks it, several swords fall out, exposing the fraud. People leave, mocking him, calling him a crook, swindler, and a terrible storyteller. The old man calls 2 guys to intimidate the protagonist, and says he'll have to pay the toll fees. The swindler couldn't deceive people, so now he's blackmailing the protagonist. He demands 10 yuans, but the protagonist says he isn't paying a cent, knocking out the 2 goons who tried to block his way. The swindler, seeing the strength of Soma, says he doesn't need to pay and that everything is free for him. The protagonist is leaving when he turns around and warns the swindler to stop with the illegal activities or he'll deal with him. Then a large man, resembling a pot-bellied monkey, appears holding the heads of 2 guys. His name is Demon King. He looks at the protagonist, saying that the younger generation doesn't respect the older, but the protagonist doesn't back down and points his finger at his face, calling him a swindler and scam artist. The monkey man doesn't like what he hears and decides to settle it with a fight, just like old times. But his punch is easily dodged while the protagonist delivers a light punch to his belly. The monkey man asks if that's the best he can do, but the protagonist says he hit lightly because the monkey man seemed weak. However, the protagonist was just experiencing high ping. 1 second later, the impact finally arrives, making a hole in the mountain behind him, further destroying the path Billy had created. The monkey man, scared by the protagonist's monstrous strength, apologizes for his sins and asks who he is. He is Soma, from Wacko. It's shown that before becoming Soma, he lived in a cave like an unstoppable beast. Someone comes and says that he is now his master and will give him a new life. From now on, he must defend Wacko from all threats. At least that was what he was supposed to do, but the city is completely peaceful. Soma is like Batman in Gotham City with no crime. But unlike Batman, he's poor and starving. The guy even had to start a business saying he'll do anything for money. Life really isn't easy for anyone. For 1 yuan, he washed 1,025 dishes but ended up breaking one and didn't get paid at all. He also carried logs, but the rope he was using snapped, and like the log in Clash Royale, it went smashing through all the houses in its path. Soma also has a business rival. All he does is tie the shoelaces of beautiful ladies. But thanks to his privileged appearance, the girls line up to have him tie their laces. Let's call him the pretty boy. The protagonist sees the swindler swimming in money and being courted by the girls while he's struggling for mere pennies. Some kids are in front of his little shop, debating whether they should hire him or not. These snotty little brats think he's just anyone, which is why they keep hiring him for silly things. like pretending to be a horse or taking a kick in the groin. Soma asks what they have to offer today, and they show him 2 potatoes, 4 ears of corn, and 3 more potatoes. Realizing that today's job will be tough given the amount they're offering, he accepts the task of rescuing a kitten stuck in a tree. Having lived as a messenger boy, he learned the best way to rescue a cat. He jumps up to the height of the cat, trying to grab it, but hits his head on the trunk, causing the poor thing to fall. The unfortunate kitten uses up 6 of its 7 lives in the fall, hitting branch after branch. Soma tries to catch it before it hits the ground, but his arms are slower than the kitten's descent. It hits the ground and dies, while the protagonist cries. The sad kids start crucifying him with looks that seem like daggers. After hearing that they asked for a refund, he picks up the cat and gives it a kiss to revive it. At least that works, as the cat wakes up and starts scratching his face. He stands there with a dazed expression, all cut up and with some sparrows pooping on his head, while the kids thank him for the job. This is the reality of Nirim. Even when the protagonist manages to succeed, he ends up screwed over. On the split mountain, a man with severe scoliosis takes a nap while guiding a cart. In this world, people don't waste time. Some walk while sleeping, others drive. Some men hiding in the bushes notice that the cart carries white and black flags, signaling that the white hand and black hand are nearby. They head towards Soma's city, while some people recognize that this cart came from the Marian fortress. Upon arriving, 2 men get out of the cart, complaining that the place was full of energy. Their superiors had instructed them to bring her to them, probably referring to the woman who adopted Soma. Speaking of which, he's coming back tired from another day of work. The man in black says it's easier to just start killing everyone to find her. They seem quite strong since just touching a rock causes it to inflate and explode. A small stone that falls from the rock hits Soma on the head. When he turns around, he sees the kids kicking a ball at the men. The white-haired man commits the greatest cruelty one can do to a child, bursting his ball and then throwing it at the kid's head, just to teach him a lesson. They decide to kill the kids to see if she appears, while the kid who got hit holds back his tears. Soma appears and picks up the deflated ball from the ground, asking them what they're going to do about it, and getting increasingly annoyed that they don't answer. The man in black takes the ball and says it wasn't intentional, inflating it again. He gives the protagonist a pat on the shoulder and tells him to take care. Suddenly, he inflates, looking like a basketball, with the kids poking him while he struggles to breathe. Just when it seems like he's going to explode, he releases all the air, becoming skinny again. He even tries to inflate himself again but fails, as that's a skill unique to the man in black. Seeing this, the 2 men become interested in Soma, wanting to beat him up. They are the Black Hand and White Hand brothers. But before the fight begins, we're introduced to the backstory of the 2 brothers. They were conjoined twins joined at the arm from birth. From the moment they discovered each other's existence, the fighting began right in the womb. Their mother was known as a maiden of unimaginable beauty, whose mere smile could shake the heart of any man. She married the Lord of the North and became pregnant with the twins. The doctor who examined her said that this pregnancy was a bit unusual. The children would drain their mother's vitality, and the king would have to choose between his wife and his children. But the king couldn't bring himself to abandon them. As the months of pregnancy passed, his wife grew increasingly thin and weak, no matter how much she ate or how many elixirs she took. During the delivery, her hair turned white and her skin clung to her bones. She was so emaciated that she couldn't muster any strength. The people who had been waiting patiently for her to give birth were traumatized when they saw the deformed children. Her mother couldn't handle the shock of seeing them that way and ended up passing away. The king, consumed by rage, killed one of his servants and declared that no one would leave the house until his children reached the age of 15. He loved his children, but they seemed to be the spawn of the devil. One day, they beat his favorite horse to death and then tore off the nanny's hand. The 2 were extremely mischievous. Their father obviously called them in for a scolding. In my opinion, they should have been locked away in a cage far from the world. When he asked why they did those things, they simply replied that they were curious. Their father questioned why they were curious about tearing off an arm, and they demonically responded that they would cut off their own. With a quick knife cut, the conjoined twins separated, creating individual bodies. 5 years later, an old friend visits the king, talking about his wife who died after giving birth to the twins, and that it has been 10 years since then. Kiji examines the children at the king's request. The black-haired boy already has the ability to inflate things. He's turning frogs into party balloons. Meanwhile, his training-obsessed brother complains that he's being a distraction. Kiji, who seems to be a master swordsman, says that the combination of him and his wife produced these little monsters. The white-haired boy seems to have learned to create ice shards, while the black-haired one has mastered the Meilong spell. Both have enough talent to surpass their father within 5 years, and while they calmly enjoy their afternoon tea, Kiji advises the king to kill his children. Personally, I think they should have been burned alive ever since they killed a horse. While they are still young, they don't pose much danger, but that will change as they grow older. Despite hearing this, the foolish king was unable to kill his children, and what was foretold came to pass. He goes searching for them, and when he arrives in the forest, he finds that all the trees have been exploded. The black-haired boy had mastered the Meilong spell and could now inflate and tear apart anything in his path, including people. The white-haired boy had mastered his ice abilities to the point of freezing anything, killing people mercilessly. When the king arrives in the city, he is horrified to see that the two mini-demons have killed everyone there. Those still alive beg for help from the king but explode soon after. The king, now realizing that his children are beyond saving, discovers they have killed over 300 innocent people. When he finds them, they are peacefully sleeping after getting drunk. The two are demons. They kill, torture, and even drink while still being minors. They just don't go driving drunk because cars don't exist in this era. They wake up and see their father crying while looking at them. He asks if he really intends to kill them just because they massacred an entire village. A ridiculous reason like that. You can't massacre another village just to get scolded. The king, filled with rage, charges at them, saying he will beat them until they find their mother. However, the two monsters easily subdue their father. They are far beyond him. So, on that day, the twins not only destroyed their father's life but also killed him, and they began to be known as the Black and White Hands. Returning to the present, the two brothers are watching the protagonist while Murim Union ninjas observe them. The Black Hand says he will fight the protagonist first, but the White Hand says he wants to go. So like true men, they decide to settle it with a game of rock paper scissors. They play a deadly game of rock paper scissors which ends in a tie, while the Murim Union ninjas appear, asking what they are doing there. The protagonist realizes a fight is about to break out, while the children suggest they should leave. He tells the brothers to leave immediately, and they wonder why, since they haven't done anything yet. They play rock paper scissors again, and this time the Black Hand wins, leaving his brother to fight the Murim Union members. With his guard down, the White Hand gently pats the leader of the ninjas on the head, and even blames him for losing the game of rock paper scissors. Seeing this, Soma grabs the children by their heads and tells them to get out because things are about to get serious. The remaining ninjas are terrified, thinking they should have come in brown pants, and quickly make their escape. It's the first time I've seen an extra act smart. While the White Hand chases them, the Black Hand faces Soma and asks his name, but all he gets is a solid punch to the jaw. With Soma, there's no conversation, it's all about fighting. As the children flee, the Black Hand tries to figure out what hit him, thinking it was because he let his guard down for a few seconds. Soma doesn't give him a chance to think and prepares a powerful kick, showing no mercy even to the disabled. However, the Black Hand manages to defend himself, though barely, as the impact is so strong it breaks the bones in his arm. Soma lands 3 more blows, each one breaking a different part of his body. The Black Hand, in his moments of agony, thinks it feels like being hit by an iron bar, but the worst part is that he can't even defend himself. He jumps back to gain some distance from Soma and again asks who he is, but the protagonist just ignores him and says he's going to start fighting seriously. The Black Hand thinks he's joking and asks if he wasn't fighting seriously until now. The protagonist replies no, while continuing to smash his face. The impact is so intense that it reminds him of a technique he created as a child. While demonstrating it to his brother, he creates a giant bubble and makes it explode into millions of attacks in all directions. His brother almost gets hit by these attacks but manages to defend himself. When the attack ends, the field is full of craters, and he thinks that if he could use that technique just once, he might win. So, as a last-ditch effort, he charges at Soma, activating his ability to unleash multiple attacks from his body, destroying the surroundings. But when the smoke clears, Soma is completely unharmed and even asks if he's ready for more. The Black Hand, upon seeing the protagonist, can perceive a blue dragon emanating from him. The fear is so overwhelming that he recalls someone as monstrous as himself. The mysterious man once told him that while his technique is good, it wouldn't work on someone truly powerful, and if he encountered such a person, he should run away as fast as possible because they would have reached a transcended state, and his technique would be nothing more than child's play. He jumps back several times, distancing himself from the protagonist, and is enraged, wondering how someone like Soma exists in a city like this. Soma is unfazed and just wants to finish what he started. He prepares to launch another attack, and the Black Hand knows that if he's hit by this, he will die. In a desperate move, he calls his brother for help. He uses his ability on the ground to break Soma's stance, causing a huge explosion of dirt around his feet. The explosion is so powerful that his brother, the White Hand, sees it and mistakenly thinks his brother is winning. He continues pursuing the ninjas, unaware of the true situation of his brother. The ninjas try to scatter in their escape, but the white hand is faster and kills the first one with a single strike, slicing them in half and freezing both parts. After the attack, the black hand says that the protagonist can't possibly come out unscathed. The problem is, he's saying this while facing the son of Saitama. When he looks, the heavy-handed protagonist is coming, punching his face so hard that it creates a crater in the ground. There was no way to avoid that. He died instantly. I'm starting to think this protagonist might be the child of Billy Lightsteps. He looks at the unconscious body of the black hand while his brother, the white hand, is still chasing the ninjas. He's so fast that he disappears and reappears next to the ninja, making another kill. To find the last ninja, he climbs onto a building, balancing on the tip of his toes. He scans the city for the ninja until a hand grabs his head. The protagonist is floating there, and he even took the trouble to bring his unconscious brother. He throws the white hand, breaking the building in half, but incredibly he survives, though not for long. He sees his brother sprawled on the ground and is confused that the black hand lost, especially to someone like that. Soma, already irritated, asks if it's really so easy for them to kill people. The white hand thinks he might be dreaming, though whether he's dreaming or not, he will soon be having nightmares. He tries to attack the protagonist but receives a punch to the chest that breaks the wall behind him before he even reaches it. The famous delayed punch. The protagonist tells them to never set foot in his city again. He's like Batman, not killing but breaking every bone in their bodies. The white hand didn't always have an interest in martial arts. To him, it seemed to require too much effort and lacked beauty. However, there was one thing that caught his attention: beautiful women. But he was never able to win them over, and like a true slave to women, he began studying martial arts, managing to freeze fire right from the start. The white hand was a genius among geniuses and had reached a new level in just one night. He froze all the women he found attractive and kept them as trophies. To him, this wasn't martial arts, it was art. When the protagonist goes to kick him, he leaps into the air, dodging the attack. With his ideals, anything he didn't consider art was destroyed, but unfortunately, the only art he will take home will be 3 broken ribs. He attacks the protagonist, but what he strikes is merely a shadow. The real one is already up above. I'm starting to think he can fly. Could he be Goku's child instead of Billy's? The white hand seizes the opportunity to attack while Soma is in the air, figuring he won't be able to dodge. Everything around him starts to freeze, and ice blades shoot out to attack, but Soma continues advancing through the attack. He prepares a punch, but before he can land it, the attack explodes into a shower of ice needles. The white hand thinks he's hit him with the attack, but within seconds, the protagonist is right in front of him, ready to deliver a beating. The punch is so powerful it penetrates the building from one side to the other, and the protagonist calmly walks up to him, seeing that he's defeated both brothers. The last ninja, who hasn't died, sees the protagonist defeating the 2 brothers and runs off to inform his superiors. Meanwhile, the man with scoliosis carries the 2 brothers back, saying that now that they've been defeated, the people in the castle won't just sit idly by, and it's best to avoid them. With tens of thousands of men and 13 castles under command, with a population of 10 million people in the cities, the castle Marion commands everything. A subordinate goes to the castle, calling for Guema. As he enters his room, he sees a giant man lying in bed with a woman beside him. The woman is already dead, turned into a skeleton. Guema gets up and says he's made another mistake, imagining how many women this man must have already killed. Just his presence alone makes his subordinate spit blood, asking him to put on his armor. This man is a monster who can crush people with his mere presence, causing anyone to vomit blood and lose consciousness just from making eye contact. His iron armor is not just for his protection but for others as well, though it's not much use since his subordinate died before he could even put it on. In the grand hall, everyone is gathered, looking at the 2 brothers sprawled on the ground. One of the people uses a black rope to lift them, noting that their breathing has stopped and their dantian has been destroyed, saying it's a shame they won't be able to practice martial arts anymore since their core has been destroyed. And so, I'm not sure how it works in this world, but I think when you stop breathing, you die. So it doesn't really matter if their chi center was destroyed. They won't be practicing martial arts because they're dead. She mentions there are no traces of other martial arts in their bodies, and the person who killed them used only simple movements. The one who seems to be their leader asks for the name of the person who left the brothers in this state, and the hunchback X9 points to the protagonist. He asks if a certain Beck has been found. She fled the fortress a month ago and seems to be currently staying in Wakal. Could we be witnessing the protagonist's new waifu? They say she needs to be brought back, and as the man of iron arrives at the meeting, he's sent to Wakal to look for Beck. He asks if they're sure, as the entire city might disappear. Little does he know who is protecting it. This man is the 6th representative of the fortress, and is known as the Madman. But don't worry, when he finds Soma, he'll heal himself, After all, the remedy for the mad is someone worse than he is. Back in the city, people are talking about Soma while fixing the craters he left in the ground. They look at the building he split in half and say it will cost 500 yuan to repair. The council representative asks if it was the handyman who did this, probably trying to pin all the damage on him. The poor protagonist, with no money in his pockets, was a hero for a day and now has become a beggar starving for food. All of this is because of the handsome parasite beside him, who attracts all the clients, overshadowing his presence. But today is the day he'll settle scores with him. However, before he realizes it, he's kneeling for a corn cob, so hungry he starts eating right there. The protagonist sees that even the boss, someone extremely angry, asked him to tie her shoelace. He understands that the problem is his face. As a group of community councilmen appears, he momentarily feels happy, thinking they'll arrest his competitor. But the head of the community council speaks to him normally since he's the child of someone important. The man looks at the protagonist, who immediately senses that telling the truth will be problematic. Before he can ask anything, the protagonist already says it wasn't him, while the man shows a damage claim contract. Fixing everything he broke will cost 1,000 yuan. Seeing this scary number, he pretends he didn't see anything, while the man hides a baseball bat behind his back. He tricks him into looking away and hits him in the head with the bat. The impact is so strong that his nose starts bleeding, but they don't believe it and hit him again. After nearly killing a beggar, they give up on the idea of him being a Murim master and leave. The protagonist, getting up suspiciously, asks the person who offered him a handkerchief if they've left. Looking closer, he sees a beautiful woman asking if he really fixes everything for 1 yuan. He's suspicious that she's talking to him, and not his competitor. She ends up inviting him to her house, and the protagonist starts imagining 2 kids and a dog with her, getting all dreamy. As they're heading to her house, she mentions that due to the ongoing fights, she's a bit scared to go home as it's a bit far. In reality, she's trying to find out if he really defeated the brothers since she can't sense his energy. While she thinks she needs to check if he's truly a master or not, he thinks she's falling for his charm. Another deluded guy falling for a woman's tricks. That night, they finally arrive at her house, which looks more like a scene from a horror movie. She asks if he wants to come in for a cup of coffee, and he accepts. At this point, one might think the man is foolish. All the signs indicate trouble, but for a woman, it's worth it. The protagonist, lost in his fantasies, opens the door to enter but suddenly stops, saying they've only known each other for a short time and things are moving too fast. She tells him to have a cup of tea and then leave, but he again stops before entering, saying he doesn't know what to say to her parents. She just gives him a kick and throws him inside, causing an armored man who lives there to sense his presence. She closes the door, locking him inside this ghostly house, and when he looks forward, he sees Momo hanging upside down. Before Beck tricks Soma into entering the house, she's conversing with the armored man, making a wooden sculpture. Could this be the legendary Moonlight Sculptor? A maid is serving tea, but Beck notices she's a puppet. I wouldn't mind having one of those at home. They talk about a war against the Murim League. She wants to recruit this guy to her side since he's the greatest puppeteer in the world. His skills are so impressive that he controls the puppet serving tea while sculpting. She says she'll lure Soma so she can test him, but not to kill him. Back to the moment when the ghost appears in front of Soma. The boy is terrified, a perfect time for him to be wearing brown pants. He greets the ghost and tries to sneak away, but when he turns, he faces the exorcist girl. The puppets attack him with knives, aiming directly at his neck, but he easily dodges, realizing those ghosts aren't actually ghosts. He asks who they are and waits for an answer, unless they really are ghosts. Several other puppets appear to attack him. Meanwhile, Beck outside wonders if the fight has started and is attacked by one of the puppets. She dodges the attack, which is so powerful it cuts through the ground. The puppet tries to attack again, but with just one finger, she stops the next attack, breaking the puppet's sword. With a mere flick, she takes it down with a famous iron finger move. But she's not done yet. With just a swing of her fingers, she slices the puppet into several pieces, also cutting a part of the house. Good thing it was already destroyed, or she might have charged for repairs. When she looks at Soma, she sees that all the puppets are destroyed and he's using his last few brain cells trying to understand how these things move. The puppet master decides to stop just watching and goes on the offensive. This scene is heavily inspired by Guts from Berserk. The puppet master launches an attack toward the two of them, even taking a tuft of hair from the protagonist. This attack is so powerful it destroys 2 houses and leaves a trail all the way to the mountains. Everyone in this story is overpowered. Soma misses the lost hair but doesn't have time to mourn before being attacked again, barely dodging. The puppet master declares that it's enough and charges forward, but gets a knee to the face. Even I felt that one. The moves he just performed were so fast that even Beck couldn't keep up. The puppet master retrieves his sword, and despite taking that full hit, he seems barely affected. All his attacks are extremely fast despite his size and the heavy armor. His sword must weigh over 100 kilograms. Sounds familiar, but this whole big sword and heavy armor thing reminds me of something. Even so, Soma is dodging all the attacks by mere centimeters. The guy is impressive, that's undeniable. The puppet master tries to sever Soma's feet, and when he looks up, the man is flying. The puppet master tells him to stop moving while Soma prepares a headbutt, which is so powerful it crushes the puppet master's head. At this point, he's definitely dead. But even with his head bent down to his stomach, the guy still gets up. This general is an unstoppable worm. He simply pulls his head back, leaving Soma confused. Has this puppet master turned into a puppet over time? Soma walks up to him and hits him to see if there's anything inside but finds it's completely hollow, wondering how the voice is coming from inside. Then the true puppet master appears, saying the protagonist is an interesting guy. In reality, what they were facing was just one of her puppets. The protagonist asks who she is, and she replies that her name is Gwi, but no one who has heard that name is alive anymore. Soma says he doesn't know her, but he can't judge. He was living in a cave until 5 years ago. Then Beck starts seeing snow and realizes that with just her breath, Gwi is freezing the entire area. The real boss has arrived. When Gwi reveals herself, she is a woman with white eyes and hair, with a piercing gaze on her face. Beck remembers her existence. Gwi, the legendary woman. Back when she was at the fortress, she and her allies were drinking and talking about a legendary figure who stained Nirim with blood 100 years ago. Beck genuinely thinks she's screwed. There's no way Soma can beat her. She says it's the first time she's been out in years. I'll say she's well preserved for an old lady. She looks at Soma and says they'll have to entertain her, while giving a malevolent glare. The protagonist doesn't know what entertaining her means, but using his limited intellect, he realizes that the witch is the true owner of the house and that the woman deceived him. The protagonist is more worried about whether she'll demand compensation for the house damage, and tries to use dialogue to escape the situation, attempting to shift all the blame for the damages onto Beck. Luckily or unluckily for him, Gwi is indeed after her. With just one touch, she throws Soma far away, and he only stops after crashing into a house. Beck is terrified as the old woman comes after her. She says that the technique she just used isn't something anyone can learn and is a technique passed down only by family heirs. While she feels sorry for the protagonist, who is unconscious, the puppet guts attacks. However, the iron finger technique manages to block the sword. He continues attacking, but she realizes fighting him is pointless since he's just a puppet. Gwi says that when her family, the Awa, was exterminated, a girl fled from the palace, and asks if Beck is that girl. Beck tries to use some tricks to win, deploying a smoke screen and attacking with her most powerful technique. However, her attack does nothing to Gwi. Using Gojo's Mugen ability, her attack doesn't even touch her. Gwi uses ice breath inside Beck's body, causing her body to start freezing from the inside out, preventing her from breathing. Besides her Mugen ability, she is also a Jedi, levitating Beck. The worst part is that she also humiliates her by saying that she is very weak. She continues, saying that many men have tried to face her, but only 3 women have attempted. The first was the Sword Master, the second was Seishin Denga, and the last was her mother. She mentions that her left shoulder was completely shattered that day, and even after 30 years, it hasn't fully recovered. Beck says that anything related to her mother has nothing to do with her, so Gwi asks her about the secret of immortality. Beck replies that if her mother knew the secret of immortality, she wouldn't have died, which is quite obvious. And just when she's about to kill Beck, Soma shows up asking if he can leave, startling Gwi as she couldn't sense his presence. He continues talking and trying to negotiate to avoid paying anything, asking her to land a blow on him. We know Soma is bold. He just saw how strong the old woman is and still dared her to hit him. Beck asks for help, but the protagonist, having learned from his mistakes, declines and prepares to leave. However, she plays a final card, saying she will pay 5 yuan. The man freezes right there. 5 yuan is a fortune for someone who could barely manage a yuan. Yet, as a good negotiator, he still manages to raise the offer to 10 yuan. Soma asks if she's really going to kill her, and tells the crown to let her go. Soma is definitely the kind of guy who would use the shirt. I'm not gay, but $10 is $10. Gwi uses the puppet guts to attack him, but with just one slap, he destroys it, leaving both women startled. He scolds her, demanding that she let his client go, and when the old woman refuses, Soma immediately goes on the offensive. He's an inclusive guy. He hits men, women, old folks. If they deserve a beating, he'll give it. But with just one hand, she blocks his attack, asking if that fist was all he had. "I've got this foot too," she says, and with a kick she sends her to the ground. Beck is freed from the technique, and Soma asks if she's okay. He tells her to stay behind him and that he'll deal with the old woman, making Beck look at him with a lovesick expression. Will she be the first to fall for the protagonist? Gwi gets up and says it's hard to read his movements since he's not using chi. The protagonist is dealing with everything purely through brute force. The man is literally Saitama's offspring. She calls for Guts Jr. and buffs him using her magic. But even then, none of his attacks can hit Soma. With just one punch, Soma creates a hole in Guts' stomach. Gwi seizes the opportunity and attacks him, using the same technique to freeze vital organs. The protagonist, paralyzed, is still hit by another attack, being thrown violently to the ground. Soma, as if he had eaten an extremely cold ice cream, simply blows the cold air from his body out. This guy is unbelievably absurd. She looks at him and realizes he has an ethereal body, capable of absorbing the chi of nature, making his pores disappear and purify. She asks who he is, but even he can't say, claiming to be just a handyman. But a handyman who can fight even against gods for $10. The guy starts pummeling the old woman, and she says it's like looking at that person in the flesh. Could she be referring to our buddy Billy? She manages to block one of his punches and says she understands his true identity. She uses a large-scale attack, starting to freeze everything around. The protagonist looks like a popsicle. She speaks of the only man who managed to make her frozen heart beat, Buryong, confirming all suspicions that our protagonist is Billy Jr. When Gwi was a child, she loved flowers very much but could never touch them, as they froze instantly. Her mother told her to appreciate them only with her eyes, while people who saw them called her a witch and threw stones at her. On the mountain, her mother treated her wounds, saying they would have to leave the next day. Gwi wondered why they had to leave when they were the ones in the wrong. Young Gwi couldn't understand why she had to hide, why she couldn't touch flowers, have friends, or even cry. The cave begins to collapse, and as they exit, a group of warriors is waiting for them. A battle ensues, and her mother ends up gravely injured, with several arrows embedded in her body. She tells her daughter to survive and that one day she will find someone she loves, as she falls into her arms. The man who attacked earlier tries to finish off Gwi, but her powers awaken, killing everyone present. After that day, she committed many sins, becoming a snow ghost until the day she met that man, the only one who made her heart beat, Buryong. My question is how he managed to win her over while walking. She approaches Soma, who is now a frozen popsicle. She continues, saying she found something of him in him, as if he were Billy's child. The protagonist, using brute force, breaks the ice and is ready to fight, but the old woman tells him to stop, saying there's no reason to fight. She defrosts Beck and begins to disappear into the air, saying that the protagonist must have many questions, but they will soon be answered. Then we discover that all this time, they were fighting a puppet. The real Gwi hadn't even shown up. So, she was controlling a puppet that controlled another puppet which controlled several puppets? This is confusing. As if it were just another normal day, he starts calling Beck a scammer, and says he will never forgive her in his entire life. But $10 is $10, so he forgives her. She wants to hire Soma as her personal assistant. With his pride, he says he would never work for a woman like her, but $10 is $10. Back in the city, the Tin Man appears asking for Soma. The effeminate man says that he's just over there, but since he's not there at the moment, the Tin Man tells him to deliver a message. The sixth representative of Fortress Mariong is looking for him. Then the effeminate man stands up, disappearing and reappearing with a sword stuck in the night. This was unexpected. The pretty boy knows how to fight. However, his sword didn't pierce him but went under his armpit. The Tin Man uses his aura to knock the hairy one down, but he manages to stay standing. The Steel Dragon Sword is one of the world's best martial arts styles. It results in lethal cuts and is an invincible technique that almost always guarantees victory. However, it is a mysterious art that can only be mastered if the user's body meets 3 specific requirements. Except for the creator, who could cut lightning, no one had truly mastered this martial art. In Gangnam, one of the 5 richest families, once known as the King of Gold, had a son. He became a father at an older age but loved his son dearly. However, the child could barely stay alive. The king used his wealth to get medicines. As soon as he was born, Bai Ryu consumed the spiritual vision medicine. By his first birthday, he ate 1,000-year-old ginseng, and so his life continued. During his childhood, he took numerous expensive medicines until the day his father, known as the richest man in the world, went bankrupt. On his 15th birthday, he consumed the fire pill and the ice pill. His body became so hot that it dried up a lake, and then so cold that it froze it. Nansang went to his home and told the boy's father that he had a perfect balance of yin and yang, but his training was so rigorous that he might die. Then, at the top of a mountain, he said that out of 10 people who fell down there, 1 survived. The problem was that he was unlucky because 8 people had already fallen, and so far, all had died. With a kick to his butt, he was sent to be the 9th. He managed to survive and began his training. The young man who spent his whole life taking elixirs now reached a completely different level of strength. With just one swing of his sword, he tore off the Tin Man's arm, then struck his neck. But all of this was too easy, and here comes the plot twist. It was all a gay jutsu of the Tin Man, and the effeminate man was actually standing still, doing nothing. The gas his body releases causes people to have hallucinations, and he takes the opportunity to punch the effeminate man. But even unconscious, he didn't let go of his sword, showing that an effeminate man never lets go of a sword, not even in death. The Tin Man jumps on him, trying to crush him with his weight, but he manages to stop the impact just by using his sword. It seems that since he took so many medicines as a child, some of them made him resistant to this poison. However, the giant says that poison isn't his only problem as he kicks the effeminate man in the head. Even though he defends himself, the effeminate man is thrown into a house, startling the elderly couple who live there. With such crushing force, speed, and poison, it's like he's fighting someone with maxed out stats in strength, speed, and defense. They need to call the GM to balance the game. He recalls how he struggled to climb the mountain. When he finally reached the top, his master threw alcohol in his face, saying he took too long, and then kicked him off the mountain, complaining that he was slow. He then performs the second move of the 9, creating a circle around him that destroys the roof of the house. But that's all because the giant remains intact. Meanwhile, Soma is serving Beck as a slave. Apparently, the contract he signed was not for service but for slavery. While he's fanning her, he seems to sense the fight between the two. Will he help the effeminate man? I bet he'll recycle the Tin Man into a nice cold Coca-Cola. Back in the fight, we find out that the attack wasn't meant to hit the Tin Man but to clear the poison from the environment. However, the guy is tough, and this strategy will only last a few minutes, so the effeminate man needs to deal with him as quickly as possible. The poison is so strong it's melting the armor. The guy is like a Chernobyl experiment. He charges, delivering multiple attacks, but the giant feels nothing, grabbing his sword and throwing him to the ground, then kicking him in the head and tossing him out of the house. The guy is pure violence. What impresses me is these Chinese houses. They are cut in half, exploded, all cracked, and still standing. The construction workers there are on another level. The giant moves to punch him, but the effeminate man manages to block it with his sword, and what a durable sword it is. However, it can't hold out much longer as the poison starts to corrode it. But the effeminate man doesn't rely solely on the sword and goes for the good old chin kick, which is so powerful it knocks the Tin Man's helmet off. But that wasn't enough to stop him. He attacks, trying to grab him, but the effeminate man dodges, tearing a piece off the tree behind. Then he delivers a punch to the ribs, so strong it tears the effeminate man's clothes and likely caused 3 different bruises on his lung. The giant then uses his second ability, which is level 2 poison, so strong it kills the plants around him. He can kill anyone who inhales it, and soon it will spread throughout the city. The effeminate man tries to attack, but with just one punch, his sword is sent flying. Now things are getting serious. The Tin Man says he can't see death in his face, which is why he lacks experience. He goes in for the final attack, but the effeminate man remembers his time as a Jedi and uses the Force to pull his sword, driving it through the Tin Man's neck. The strike was so dangerous that he almost impaled himself, stopping just near the eye. Nobody expected this, but the effeminate man won the one-on-one. He then removes his sword from the now poisoned body and throws it, and a member of the Murim Union catches it. He orders them to clean up the mess. Damn, the effeminate man is a Murim leader, total respect. Meanwhile, the protagonist sees the hole in the wall where his former workplace used to be. To make matters worse, he is not just a slave but also a cart puller. How did he end up in this situation? A few days ago, Beck offered him a contract to sign, but what he didn't know was that it was a contract for slavery, and after that, hell began in his life. It's like the saying goes, just because things are bad doesn't mean they can't get worse. Soma is a prime example. Someone with an ethereal body who managed to endure a one-on-one with the ice which is now reduced to feeding Beck by mouth. How far will a man go for money? His life has become pure hell. He has to wash her clothes. Are the underwear included? He has to hold an umbrella in the rain and sun. She even makes him fetch water from the valley. You'd think there's no water there, but no, Soma is almost choking on the water. She just wants to mess with him. Pure malice. And when he's not doing anything, she makes him push stones. What a woman. The worst part is that all this happened in just one day. Soma, the job isn't easy. Maybe being a streamer is the way to go. Of course, he's not that much of a fool, so he decides to confront her. The problem is, he looks like he's about to beat her up, but instead, he approaches calmly to talk. He asks if this is indeed a slavery contract, and she confirms that it is. Then she shows him the fine print, the world's biggest problem, the fine print. It says that this is literally a slavery contract and that if the contractor doesn't fulfill the demands of the employer, they won't be rewarded. In summary, he's screwed. Back at the Mariung Fortress, number 5 in the ranking, a man is seen running quickly to their leader. They all find out that the Tin Man was killed, and now all the leaders will unite and head to the protagonist's city because it's turned into a war situation. We move to the Dead Sea, where you can see that even frogs drown. The water in this sea has deteriorated to the point where all the fish have died. It's more polluted than the river in Chernobyl. Chun and Daeho board the boat, and to illustrate how polluted this river is, the boat is made of special wood because other types of wood would corrode. These two are among the 12 leaders of the Murim Union. They're having this meeting because they're afraid of the upcoming war, so they plan to go to the Ghost Valley. There lives the person who was the last hope for the Murim after Billy Lightsteps. This legend living in the Ghost Valley is called Yacha, and they need to recruit him urgently because if he becomes an enemy, they're in trouble. An old man from the Murim Union sends a messenger there, and we see that the guy is impressive because he disappears from the boat in the middle of the river. No goodbye. Meanwhile, our slave, or rather protagonist, is eating with Beck. At least she's feeding him. But even the food is strange. Why does she put this toothpaste-like stuff in it? She asks about the woman who helped him, but all he knows is that she named him Soma and told him to take care of the village. She asks if he really obeyed a woman he had never met, but Soma says she was a good person, unlike some others. She remarks that at least he knows her name, but Soma is just interested in eating his jockball. She thinks he has a mysterious background since no one knows where he came from, yet he managed to fight on equal terms with the Ice Witch. He can run at high speeds without spilling a drop of water. By the way, isn't that the messenger passing by him? And he's also incredibly strong, able to push a rock through the earth. It's like he's the Saitama of this world. Moreover, he's immune to poison. After all, that thing she was putting in the food wasn't toothpaste. Even though he's eating poison, the only thing he says is that it tastes bad. The guy is tough. She explains that the Mariung Fortress is going to start a war against the Murim Union. But the protagonist seems a bit clueless and doesn't really care about what's happening. We also learn that Beck is working as a double agent, giving information to the leader of the Murim Union. But since she's been discovered, she has to flee. Then we see the effeminate man, who is quite injured after the fight. He has a red stain on his abdomen and is using nails on his arm. While he's reflectively looking out the window, the guy inside is having a barbecue. The messenger arrives, the one sent to the Ghost Valley, but before heading there, he decides to make a quick stop to visit an old friend. He comments that his friend is in bad shape while entering the house. The cheeky guy starts eating someone else's barbecue, and the worst part is that the barbecue was meant for the captain. He points to Beck, who is sitting below with Soma, and says she must die, not realizing that God is protecting her. Meanwhile, GWI is heading to the Ghost Valley. Will there be a meeting of the ops there? I don't know. The effeminate man asks why she must die, and the messenger says it makes sense that he doesn't know since he became a leader right after finishing his training. The messenger explains that she was the one who provided information about the war, the last survivor of the Weiha Palace. Returning to their conversation, the protagonist says he's not interested in the war but is curious about who she really is. We then get a glimpse into Beck's story. In her palace, she was trained by her mother. For several days, she tried to emulate her mother, who could cut water-filled vases with just a flick of her fingers. She took a while, but one day she managed to cut a leaf into several pieces. She went to bed happy with her achievement, but that night assassins invaded her palace. Her maid managed to get her out of there, but when they reached the outside, she saw her mother fighting one of the assassins. Her mother was strong, but even she couldn't defeat them. They continued fleeing through a secret passage, but at the end of the passage, the man was waiting for them. Her nanny fought against this man, giving her the chance to escape, but even so, she was found by the leaders of the fortress. They asked her about the immortal phoenix. She had no idea what it was but lied, saying she knew. Because of that, she was brought to the fortress and is now a target for the Murim Union, as it would be a problem if she actually knew where the phoenix was and handed it over to their enemies. The messenger says the order was for the effeminate man to kill her, but he prefers to handle it by throwing the staff at the wood. The impact is so strong that a piece flies off, almost hitting Beck. It almost hit her, but instead, it hits the protagonist squarely in the butt. With a sad face, she says that this kind of situation is normal. People always try to kill her, but now she has the protagonist. Or rather, she doesn't have him, because when she opens her eyes, Soma has disappeared from in front of her, and is now confronting the messenger. He asks if it was the messenger who ruined his favorite jockball. He's like Mash. He can do whatever he wants with everyone, but don't touch his profiteroles. This guy really deserves a beating, stealing others' barbecue and ruining the protagonist's food. Now the fight is about to begin, and even the old folks down below are waiting to watch. The situation is so serious that even some Urim Union ninjas are watching from afar. One of them asks if they should intervene, but the other says that the three there are monsters, and if they go, it might spell trouble for them. Just when we think the fight is about to start, the messenger backs down and says it was just an accident, but the protagonist doesn't buy it and is still pissed because he ruined his food. So he says they'll have a little dialogue, bringing down a heavy hand on the messenger. The punch is so strong it pushes him backward, and then he follows up with a chin kick that drives him into the ceiling. It looks like a cartoon scene. While the barbecue guy is in shock, the effeminate man remains neutral, as if it's the most normal thing in the world. Then we see that the guy is indeed tough. Not only did he withstand the protagonist's kick, but he also found a kitten that was there. He descends from the ceiling and attacks the protagonist with his staff, but this attack is just to scare him, hitting the wall behind him. He's showing off, but the protagonist throws a punch that is blocked by the staff. The folks outside, seeing a martial arts fight starting, quickly leave to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. The extras in this story are truly smart. In most cases, they'd stay there watching until the building fell on them, but this Chinese building won't fall no matter what. The fight continues, and the two start exchanging blows, but the protagonist seems to be gaining the upper hand. The messenger activates a skill and lands an attack on Soma's chest, but the guy has a chest of steel and tanks the hit. The effeminate man halts the fight, asking what the hell he was thinking since the technique he used could have made a hole in Soma's chest, although he withstood it well. The effeminate man says he doesn't need help and will handle Beck his way. The messenger asks who the hell this guy is, but even the effeminate man doesn't know and says he's just a jack of all trades. As he's leaving, the effeminate man orders him to reveal his identity. The man in front of him isn't the real messenger. He puts a sword to his neck, saying that if he doesn't identify himself, he'll kill him right there. The messenger is impressed that they figured this out so quickly. He's indeed not the real messenger, but if he's not, then who is he? The effeminate man checks the scroll to kill Beck and finds out it's real. This man has been infiltrated in the Urim Union longer than he thought. His only question is where the real messenger is, but with a smug look, he says he's not interested in answering. They end up talking a bit more, but it all ends in a brawl. The impact of their fight is so strong that it destroys the house. This time, the Chinese builders couldn't hold up, but when the dust settles, the fake messenger manages to withstand both attacks. They continue attacking together but are humiliated. He manages to defend against the sword with just the staff. The Union Urim guard doesn't even attempt to do anything, knowing that if he steps in, he'll be 6 feet under. Seeing that it's impossible to win against the two in his current fake form, he decides to reveal his true self. Just the change in transformation breaks the staff he was holding. The effeminate man is curious to know who he is, as his power compares to one of the 12 leaders of the Union Urim. But when he reveals himself, the effeminate man is stunned. His blue eyes reveal his identity. He is none other than the master of the Phantom Valley, Yacha. The protagonist has no idea who he is. As I mentioned, he lived in a cave until recently. Soma asks why he has the name of a car while scratching his ear. Man, this guy has no regard for life. Yacha is impressed when he looks at the protagonist. He has several needles scattered throughout his body. These needles not only block his memories but also inhibit his cultivation. In short, the monster we're seeing now is sealed. He's not at his full power. The barbecue guy decides to die because he suddenly goes crazy and attacks Yacha. The sword hitting his neck breaks, and his hands start to entwine with each other. The protagonist says he appreciates his interest in him, but he's not into guys. If he wants some corn silk tea, he can have it. I don't understand if he's thinking about sitting down and having a chat with the guy, although sometimes not everything can be resolved with fighting. Even Yacha finds it funny, so funny that his laughter causes earthquakes. Now it's really bad for them. As usual, Soma serves him a punch, hitting Yacha in the face. However, nothing happens, and then he prepares another punch. This punch is so powerful it sends the protagonist down to the floor below, but amazingly, he gets up calmly. What isn't calm is the people running around in panic. To make the protagonist envious, Yacha sends the effeminate man down as well. He convinces the protagonist to attack together, but Yacha says even that isn't enough and fears they won't survive. The guy is so badass that he's not fighting to kill, yet they still don't have a chance to survive. The effeminate man throws a table at him, and then launches several sword attacks, but with one hand, Yacha defends everything. The effeminate man tries to use the dragon cut, but even that doesn't help, with Yacha again defending with one hand. It's time to drop the sword and pray to God. And like everyone who's badass in this manhwa, he's also a Jedi, using the Force to throw the effeminate man to the ground. Even with tremendous pressure, he manages to get up and throws his sword, easily holding him by the neck. But that was the plan, saying he will take him to hell with him. He uses his Jedi skills and pulls the sword, aiming to pierce both of them. However, without even needing to look, he holds the sword, saying that even though he's using one of the best martial arts in the world, he still relies on pathetic tricks, throwing him into the corner like trash. But it's not just him. Soma punches him while he's unguarded, but Yacha easily holds him back. It's like Newton's law, every action has a reaction, but this reaction is so strong that it throws the protagonist far away, breaking everything in its path. While still in the air, Yacha kicks him, breaking the entire floor around him, leaving the protagonist unconscious. He says his expectations were high, but this was disappointing. The effeminate man says he's still very injured from his last fight, his sword is broken, and the protagonist is knocked out, or rather, was, because the man appears holding a pillar and tells him to hold this disappointment, while breaking it over his face. He kicks him right after, but it does nothing, seeing that the fight is too easy. Yacha says he won't use his hands and won't move while the protagonist hits him. If he can move him even 1 millimeter, he won't kill Beck. If you had doubts about how badass he is, you don't anymore. The protagonist lands a blow to his head that does absolutely nothing. Using only his voice, he throws Soma out of the house. Outside, Soma tells Beck not to get involved and to stay put. Even as her slave, he's still fulfilling his role of protecting her. He goes back inside, trying to kick Yacha, but he ends up taking a kick himself, getting thrown upwards. He returns with pure rage. His punch is so powerful that even defending it causes the surrounding area to break. But the worst part is that he had to use his hands to defend. The blow was so intense that Soma continues to sink, nearly ending up in hell. Soma tells Yacha to honor his part of the agreement, confirming that he won't kill Beck today. However, this doesn't apply to him. Yacha uses a skill that increases the gravity around them, paralyzing the protagonist. He continues to increase the gravity until the protagonist is the one heading to hell. But from there emerges a true demon, or rather, a dragon. Yacha comments that it's starting to get interesting as the protagonist emerges from the hole in a nearly beastly form, resembling Naruto when he first awakened Kurama. Yacha is impressed that Soma can use ki even with so many needles from the Emperor embedded in his body. However, he's talking to himself too much and gets a knee to the face to wake up. This time, Soma's attacks start to cause real damage, as if he were fighting an animal relying solely on instinct. But despite this massive power boost, Soma still can't handle Yacha. Yacha easily evades his attacks, noting that his movements are simple. To the effeminate man, it's like being in a jungle where he's a coyote amidst a fight between two beasts. He says he won't fight because he has no sword, but then 5 appear in front of him. Damn Murim bastards want him to suffer. The effeminate man grabs one of the swords and attacks Yacha. His attack is so powerful it splits the house in half, even scaring Beck, who's outside. But the last thing she sees is the effeminate man getting kicked and Soma rising behind him. With just a swing of his arm, Soma explodes the house. The most unfortunate thing in this story is this building. So, this is where the video ends. Like and share for more summaries like this. Goodbye.